morning, sisters and brothers. Welcome to another exciting edition of Faith Matters, where we talk about faith because faith does indeed matter. I know it's kitschy, but it also works. And the one thing is, you don't forget it, do you? See, there is a reason for why we do what we do. We've just concluded a beautiful outdoor mass. We had about 45 people worshiping in the sunshine. A little chilly, but that was okay. It's a blessing to be able to see people, even when we're masked and gloved and sanitized like crazy. There's just something special about being together, and I think an extra added piece of it is being together outside. That was really great.
Yeah, it was a beautiful morning.
Yeah. We're getting into a good place right now. So this morning's gospel is a very interesting one. I'm really curious to hear what you biblical scholars have to say about it, because there's a lot to it. There's definitely a lot to it. Don't mind me, I'm just trying to get on online here. You are shirking.
I am.
That's okay.
Not by much. It's only 9:01 even now.
I got talking, I'm sorry.
You got talking.
found it?
I'm so shocked. Yes, I did find
Awesome, sorry.
it. I did find it.
Okay.
So, as I was saying, the gospel passage, well, let's see what you all have to say about it. Let's listen to Matthew's gospel. The Pharisees went and plotted to entrap Jesus in what he said. So they sent their disciples to him, along with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are sincere and teach the way of God in accordance with truth, and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not?" But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax." And they brought him a denarius. Then he said to them, "Whose head is this, and whose title?" They answered, "The emperor's." Then he said to them, "Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's." When they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away.
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah.
Go
This
ahead.
is one of the ones everybody knows, right?
Speak up loudly, please.
I know. Like, this is one of the more common ones that most people know.
And you might have heard this story. It's also in Luke's gospel. So you've heard the same story with slightly different wording.
Yeah, but this is one of those ones that makes you think how smart Jesus was. Like, I know. I remember one time you were talking about how smart he was in the parables and his teachings, and this is one of the ones that's like, wow. You know.
Well, he also identifies, when he begins speaking, he even says, why are you trying to make trouble?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Why are you testing me? I forget how it's phrased in Luke. But it's basically, first off, he's calling them on them being less than ideal or loving,
Right.
and he's without mentioning it explicitly, he is very much resisting and rejecting dualistic thinking. That this is right or wrong. It's a yes or no question. And if you say yes, then it's one of those things that, if they say yes, because there were some laws saying you don't give the money to the emperor.
Right.
But of course the Roman law says you do. And they were trying to set him up for crucifixion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it begins, immediately Because the first sentence is, the Pharisees went and plotted to entrap Jesus in what he said.
Right.
We know what we're dealing with from the very beginning here.
Right. An interesting flip-flop is that Jesus, and that wasn't all that long ago that we did that gospel lesson, where he says, I forget what they asked him, but he says, well, I'll tell you what, I'll answer your question with a question.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know. Where do you get the authority to do what you do?
Right.
And he says, I'll answer that question with a question. And then asks about John the Baptist's baptism. Is it from God or not? And he puts the dualism onto them, and they realize if they say it's A, they're, what's a nice word for screwed? They're in trouble.
Yeah.
And if they say B, they're in trouble in a very different way, but also in trouble.
That's
and
right.
so he gets them with their own dualism.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Now, let's go to your commentary. Danny says he believes the reason that Jesus asked for a coin is because of the Jewish command against graven images. So in doing this, he's calling out their hypocrisy.
Amen.
Yeah. Right. Kelly says our civic and spiritual responsibilities are distinct things and each have their proper time and place.
Also, amen.
Yeah.
And Jesus pretty much says that explicitly at other places in the gospel.
Right.
He says it in pay unto Caesar what Caesar and what God is God's. Yeah. That's the summary.
That's kind of this, right?
Yeah.
Heather says that this was Jesus' effort to flip the script, ultimately creating separation of church and state. Well, I think that's more of a modern day invention. That goes back a few hundred years, not a few thousand years, because then the church and the state were essentially the same. You know, the Pharisees and the Sanhedrin, they were the Jewish authorities, and it was the Jewish state, which was also the church, who got Jesus crucified.
But I mean, nowadays they could have used this passage to support the separation of church and state.
Oh, of course.
This is probably one of the ones that they've used. Yeah.
And of course, state could be referring, as I think Heather probably is, to the Romans, not the Sanhedrin.
Right.
Right.
And when they all got together, real bad things happened.
Yeah.
It was the perfect, absolute union of Roman state with theological that created the crucifixion.
Yeah. Well, and we have that here because it says, after that first sentence, it says, the Pharisees sent their disciples to Jesus along with the Herodians. Now, what the Herodians, little history lesson at the time, the Herodians were the followers of Herod, and Herod was a vassal king. What that means is he was king of Judea, but the Romans were really in charge, and so the only way he maintained his kingship was by being a vassal to Rome, or doing what Rome wanted him to do. So he was kind of like a puppet king.
Yeah.
He was still in charge, but he was in charge only to the extent that they let him be in charge. You know, men, kind of like being married.
Ha!
Right?
Wow.
That's an analogy.
I'll pay for that one later, I know. But
must be time for me to go, right?
So if you're Herod, yeah, you might be the Jewish king, but you're really a Roman Jewish king. And so when it says that the Pharisees, who were the Jewish leaders, brought the Herodians, that was almost akin to saying they brought the Romans. What they did is they brought the Roman sympathizers with them.
Right.
So whenever those two sides who don't see eye to eye on almost anything come together, you know that's a bad thing. They saw Jesus as a larger threat than each other.
Right, that politics makes strange bedfellows.
Exactly.
And Jesus created a lot of that strange bedfellowing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Hello, Skylar. Hello, Ryan. Ryan, I like the new hair color.
Yeah, I saw that. I didn't get a chance to talk to you, but it looks good on you, man. Rosalie absolutely is correct. Jesus is using the Socratic method of teaching. And I really do like that he's forcing them to expand their worldview, because they think they've got him sort of in a trick bag. This is an either or. It's a dualistic, it's a binary system. There are only two possible answers, and Jesus very expertly sidesteps their trap and picks a third answer. So what do we think about what the Herodians and the Pharisees say to Jesus?
Yeah, I saw that too.
You know, teacher, we know that you are sincere, and you teach the ways of God in accordance with truth, and you show deference to no one, for you don't regard people with partiality.
Yeah. They're just sending them all the platitudes.
Right.
Yeah.
They're buttering them up.
Yep. Right.
It's quite obsequious, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, if you know Jesus, the idea of even opening with that is so pathetic.
Right?
It just shows how little they were getting him.
Right.
If they thought that would in any way knock him off kilter, and then they'd get the damning answer out of him that they were seeking,
Right.
it just shows how absolutely underestimating they were of him.
That's correct.
I mean,
That's right.
it comes from a big fan here, but
Yeah. Right.
they obviously had not heard him preach much, or they would have been aware, I think, of a greater intelligence, and that Jesus would have clearly spotted their insincerity and obsequiousness.
Right.
Yeah, Jesus was not one for being shined on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've all seen or experienced a boss who just, loves to be buttered up. Jesus is not that guy.
Yeah, Judy Watts says the same. Like he didn't see through all that.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
But they probably got away with it for everybody else, Like
Well-
the powers fed off the power of
Right.
it in those days, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The Pharisees, they adored being recognized and being deferred to and getting the best place at the table and just everybody knowing how incredibly great they were. And so it doesn't take a great leap of faith to think that, well, if the people in charge of the religion like that kind of stuff, sure, Jesus is going to like it. Yeah, not so much.
Yeah. And he calls them out, you hypocrites, which he's constantly calling them out on their hypocrisy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No,
Brian says Jesus artfully kept religion and politics separated. Wise action for our church leaders to follow.
I don't know. We have to be really careful about taking our 21st century understanding and worldview and superimposing that on first century Palestine, because the world was very different then. Politics and religion were inextricably linked. They were not separated issues. There were just different levels of political world, because the Romans were one political reality, the Herodians were another, and the temple was a third. So there were multiple layers involved in this. It was not an easy either or. And I think that's part of the challenge here. That's one of the things Jesus does with this, is he really cautions us to avoid either ors.
Yeah, well, they were occupied by the Romans at this point, right?
That's correct.
So, to the Jewish people, the Romans were the enemy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and that was the real challenge here, because this is why they thought they had Jesus completely tripped up. If he said, yes, it's lawful to pay taxes to the emperor, what they were doing was setting him against the temple and against the Jews, because the emperor claimed to be a god. And there is no other God. There is but one God. So if he said it was okay to pay taxes to the emperor, then he was affirming the divinity of the emperor, and that was surely going to cause problems for him with the Jews. However, if he said, no, it wasn't, these were an occupied people. And now he was going to be in trouble with the Romans, because it was a crime to not pay taxes to the emperor. So one side or the other was going to have Jesus all sewn up on this thing, and Jesus picked something else entirely. And he changed their paradigm.
Laura, the thread is on separation of church and religion. Laura Cannon asks, the question is, when does caring about what goes on in the world become politics? It's an interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. There's a lot of different ways to look at that. I mean, early voting began yesterday in this state, so we are currently involved in yet another consequential election. I do laugh because every 4 years you get the announcer saying, "This is the most consequential election in the history of the nation." And in some ways they're right, but every succeeding one gets to be that way. So we love to have a lot of hype, especially on the television stuff. But our challenge is to reconcile our Christianity and our beliefs with the political worldview. And I'm not going to tell you how you have to be, but I'm going to tell you to use our beliefs, your own beliefs, as a barometer of where you fall on the political spectrum. Yeah, Jesus' answer was brilliant, Nathan. You were quite right. Jesus recognizes the power of Rome, but is asserting the more powerful God. Amen.
Yeah.
Danny said the apostles included a zealot and a tax collector, two diametrically opposed positions at that time. Jesus reframes the argument away from the worldly to the eternal. While the money is of this world, our allegiance should be to God. We aren't to rebel, much like he did with the temple. Sorry, my phone's just buzzing. You're all typing in here. We are to do so as to not give offense. Okay. Brian says, I prefer not to hear political views expressed from the pulpit. The Bible is so rich in other questions. I agree with you completely, Brian, and that's why we don't preach politics from the pulpit. But we do preach Jesus. And Jesus did not avoid the world as it was presented to him. He told us to feed the hungry, to heal the sick, to clothe the naked. Those are the founding principles of Christianity. And that's what we talk about. You're never going to hear me talk about Democrat or Republican, but you are going to hear me talk about our call to discipleship.
I don't think Brian would have cared much for John the Baptist.
Probably not.
A lot of us probably wouldn't be able to
Probably not.
get in touch with John the Baptist.
John the Baptist was scary.
Right. To me, he was almost like the people that stand on the street corners and shout.
He really was.
And we're very uncomfortable with that kind of preaching or... Yeah. So...
What else? What else have you heard in here? I think it's time.
Yeah. All right.
That's it? No more thoughts on this passage?
Usually doing fast. Yep.
I thought we would have a whole lot of comments on
We
this
got 12
one.
more minutes to go back to the
Wow.
tithing theme.
Yeah, I know.
There you
I was
go.
going to say, this has been used for, I was thinking that too. This has been used for, stewardship. So where does that come into the whole
Of course.
thing, right?
Well, give to the emperor
Give-
the things of the
right,
emperor,
right.
and give to God the things that are God's.
So, yeah,
Yep. You can make it a stewardship sermon.
that's what people have done. Yeah.
If you were not at 8 o'clock, I'm not preaching on this text today because I actually preached on this text, middle of August, as a way to enter into the whole conversation about avoiding dualistic either-or thinking. Trying to get us to stop going to the far extremes and to look for where we can meet and the things about which we agree, like feeding the hungry and clothing the naked, etc., etc. That Christian stuff. So I don't talk about this particular sermon in this particular. I don't talk about this gospel in this sermon. I'll get it out, my friends. Don't worry.
So let me get this straight. If I say, okay, I'm following Jesus' example, and I'm giving so many thousands of dollars a year to Caesar, also known as the IRS,
right?
And I tithe 11.1%, and that amount is to God's, that's all fine. But if I say, and the amount I gave to Caesar is, I don't know, 10 times greater than the president pays, that would be political.
I think you just went political, yes.
Okay, I just as a measurement.
Well, because then we get into the whole thing about what are facts and what are not facts.
Right.
And I don't want to go down that route. There are people on television 24 hours a day who are only too happy to discuss and dispute those things till the cows come home. But we're not going to do that, because I don't think that's what we need to talk about. But I do think we need to talk about Christianity.
Well, God provides it all wherever it goes. I can say that joyfully and truthfully.
Schuller says, to me, till this day, all what happened in the Bible is happening now, but maybe worse. I don't know about worse, but there is sort of the whole what goes around comes around thing, isn't there?
Yeah, nothing new under the sun.
Yeah. Rosalie says, don't you think we're asking the same questions today regarding religion or our duty to God? Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're doing. And that's why this whole forum exists, to give us an opportunity to ask our questions and to debate things in a space that's safe. I'll close that door because we had some musical performance going on here. Kelly says, it's easy to forget that in many respects everything is God's, and of thine own have we given thee. How does that fit in here? Basically, it's just that. It becomes a question of, to whom do we owe our allegiance? That's really what this is asking. What they were trying to do when they went to Jesus was force him to choose between God and the emperor. And as I've said already, either way he was going to lose. It was your classic lose-lose scenario. But that's not what Jesus chose to do. Isn't it true that Jesus was invited to enter into politics and take a leadership role, but always declined? I don't think politics the way we understand politics. Jesus was not asked to take a seat on the Sanhedrin. He wasn't a Pharisee. But the fact that they called him rabbi and deferred to him and let him teach was really a mark of respect. I don't think it would have been a great leap for Jesus to try to become the head of a political movement, the Zealots or something like that, or even the Essenes. There were a number of Jewish sects at the time, and Jesus probably could have created his own, but that's not what he chose to do. Laura says, politics often is equal to stuff I disagree with. Yeah. And that is part of the problem. We've let the word politics become almost a dirty word, right? And that's not good. Politics has the same root as the word polite. Boy, I don't think of politeness and politics in the same way right now, do you? But it doesn't have to be that way. We've let our world get so polarized into this either-or proposition, and boy, I see some real value in this particular gospel from that perspective. You know, the Pharisees were absolutely over here, and they thought, we'll get Jesus over here, and the Herodians were absolutely over here, and they thought, okay, Jesus has to come to one of us, and Jesus picked the middle ground that was completely different. And actually, at the same time, honored both of them. Give to the emperor what's the emperor's, give to God what's God's, and here I am finding that middle way. There's a lesson for us. Politics has become so dirty. Well, you're right, Dina. But by the same token, boy, if you really want to understand dirty politics, look around the turn of the 19th into 20th century. We think politics is mean and dirty now. It was so much worse back then. But why do we let it be that way? And that's not what Jesus did here. Jesus didn't start ranting and raving and telling them that they were both bad. Judy, I'm not sure that's helping the discourse. She says, poly meaning many, and ticks meaning blood-sucking insects. Well,
personal etymology.
I think so. I think so. Yeah, the election of Andrew Jackson, Nathan reminds us, really bitter partisanship and just tough stuff. Even if you look back to when Lincoln was elected, what was going on back then. Kelly asks, don't the apostles, especially Judas, try to talk him into taking political power? Well, in the Lloyd Webber version, yeah, but please don't conflate that with the real part of the gospel. The whole idea of the Messiah was to be that leader who was going to throw off the yoke of Roman oppression and to restore the kingdom of Israel. That was the understanding of the Messiah, and that was why a lot of people didn't think Jesus really was the Messiah, because he didn't do any of that. The disciples knew that he was indeed the Messiah, but they were frustrated because he didn't do what they wanted him to do. He didn't take on the traditional mantle of the Messiah. Although if he had, he would have been just another in a long line of political leaders. Jesus was something so much more, but they didn't understand it at the time.
I think it's pretty clear in the gospel that, I mean, there are those moments where they said they tried to make Jesus king, and the idea of being king presumes that he would be political and military, and Jesus refuses both. So I'm making reference to Kelly's comment that she's worried about conflating Lloyd Webber's interpretation of the actual gospel. But I think it's strongly implicit and in a few places explicit in the Gospels, this expectation that Rick just mentioned, that Jesus would be the king, would be military, and would be political.
Right.
An expectation that he disappointed, which is yet another reason he got crucified.
Exactly. Yeah, Jesus was not willing to ascribe to their paradigms of power or leadership or the world. He staked out ground that nobody was on and nobody saw coming.
I don't know that we're kind of hitting a nice wrap-up spot, but the clock kind of says we should head that way.
Yeah, we really are, because we've got the next things to do. interesting conversations today, my friends. As always, you bring really disparate viewpoints, and we have just really good give and take, and there's so much power to that, and so much wisdom. So thank you for that. All right, somebody's asking, when is the church service? Great segue for me, and then we'll wrap this up.
Right.
Our church service is at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So in just a half an hour from now, what we're wrapping up right now is our 9 o'clock education forum called Faith Matters. And so at 10 o'clock, we will be on with our worship service, followed by right around 10:45, our online coffee hour and conversation. So that's kind of the schedule for the rest of the day.
And Sandra, if you're here in Vegas, we're next Sunday doing the 8 a.m. outdoor service again. You might very probably need a jacket, but from 8 to 8:35 next Sunday, right on our patio again. We'd love to have you.
They're busy Sunday mornings, as always, my friends. All right, thank you. God bless you. God love you. And we will see you shortly.